I'm Jeremy Koo. I'm the professor from the Department of Life Science, and on behalf of the College of Life Science, I would like to welcome all of you to join this very special lecture by Chancellor Larry Vanderhoff. And Larry is very long, has been working for the Chancellor for a really long time, and for UC Davis, and I'm also a UC Davis alumni, and so it's my great honor to give this opportunity to bring Larry here for this course, Biology for Future Presidents, and I believe all of you will have a very fruitful lecture. So without any further ado, I would like Larry to for his lecture. Let's welcome Larry.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming and joining us. It's going to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this time of the evening until the week before. Wait, no, I can't do this. Do you have Thanksgiving here? Until about the 18th, I think. Is one of these not on? Closer? Is this microphone on? Yeah? Okay. So, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope it works out okay for you as well. What I'd like to do during this first session is to talk a little bit about the course and how it came to be and where we're going to be headed, what we're going to be talking about, and why we're going to be talking about the things that are on the agenda. Also, the course is being videotaped for, what's it called? Open coursework? Thank you. Is anybody here that knows about it, that can talk about it? I'm looking around and I'm not seeing. Anyway, so that's why I've got two microphones on. So let me talk a little bit about the course. Probably the most important part about the title is the concepts that can be easily understood. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, including stem cells and genetically engineered plants, things that are in their way kind of mysterious, but they shouldn't be because they are very simple concepts, and so we're going to be covering them. And when I say simple, I don't mean simple for the biologist, I mean simple for everybody. It's just that we biologists haven't done a very good job of teaching biology, especially to people that might take it as a general education course, for example. We make it too difficult. It's not that difficult. In fact, it's very, these concepts are very simple, and I think that's what you will find. If you don't understand right now what exactly a stem cell is, or what does it mean to be genetically engineered, what does it mean what is a genetically engineered food, what does that mean? What about evolution as well? We'll be talking about evolution, and I'll tell you why that's on the list in just a moment. So those are the concepts that we're going to be covering, and I'll talk about them just a little bit more. But before I do that, just pay attention to some of the information. I'm in this building, and I'm just one floor down. I will always be in that office in the afternoons on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And after the 8th of this month, I will be there almost all the time. So you'll be able to come by. But before you do that, if you have questions or if you want to talk about something, you should email me first so that I will be there for sure when you come. And we can have a chat about anything you wish. The way we'll be doing things on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is the class will go from about 6:30 until 7:10, and then we'll have a break, and then it'll start up again around 7:25 or 7:30, and during the second half of the class, we will have either some more of whatever the topic is that we're talking about, or a quiz. There will be during the course of the year, there will be 6 quizzes, but one of them you'll be able to drop from final calculation of the grade. There will be 2 things that are important to you that are going on to the course website. The course website, you want to say some more about that? And you can say it in Chinese. Introduce yourself first, and then tell them about that, because you will be handling it.
各位同学大家好，我叫李景元，就是负责你们班的那个 TA。然后那个今天的讲义我会送到那个 CBA 上，所以你们应该都会知道有你们 CBA 账号，我们就进去登录以后去找。今天讲义都会上 CBA。然后，如果有什么问题，可以用 CBA 来跟我联络。然后另外一个助教是翁少义，他也是负责你们的课，就我们2个应该每次都会来，除非我们有事。然后还有你班的，我们帮你们选一个班带，李新瑞。所以如果你们有什么话不敢跟我们讲，你也可以跟他讲，他再跟你讲。
So they now know that both the what's going to be on the website, both the PowerPoint.
Okay. 然后我们会把课程里面不是有 PowerPoint 嘛，所以 PowerPoint 会放上去。然后老师另外还有一些他上课内容大概的文字，他都已经把它弄好，都会放上去。所以说你们在网络上可以拿到3个档案，今天会有3个档案。一个是我们课程的表，一个就是 PowerPoint， 然后以及老师上课他讲的 PowerPoint 的内容的文字档。OK。
CBA 上面现在有4个档案啊。
4个吗？4个，有一个是算多的，他在讲slide，在讲介绍。
是那个上会用到吗？
应该是不用吧。
Okay. So again, both the PowerPoint and a narrative will be on the website. And the reason for that is there may be times during the lecture. I apologize for the fact that I don't speak Mandarin. I don't speak Taiwanese. I don't speak any Chinese, and it may be that some things slip by. Maybe I don't say them clearly enough, or for whatever reason, the point doesn't get across. And so that is why when I say the narrative, I mean it's a document. It's just a couple of pages that describes the PowerPoint presentation. So it's more or less the same as the lecture. And so you will be able to go back over it if you choose. Now, how did this course is being given in different circumstances? Well, I'll just leave it at that. But I got before that time, just through surveys and the questioning of people, of both students and people who were out of school already, what were the issues in biology that for them were not clear, and what should really be talked about in a class like this? And at the top of the list was evolution. That may not be true in Taiwan, but it is still true, unfortunately, in America. And it has a lot to do with people's views and attitude about religion and intelligent design and so forth. So that's at the top of the list. But some of the other things that we'll be talking about that you'll see, can I move that? In this content part of the outline, some of the other items that we'll cover are HIV/AIDS, and what it says here is cancer, HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS is actually not a cancer, but virtually everybody that gets HIV, the virus, and then the follow-up AIDS, dies of a cancer, and we'll learn why that's the case. We'll talk about our immune system, and the immune system happened to be number 3 on the list. And the immune system is important because, well, let me just say that I would not be afraid to bet that every single person in this class has had cancer. You didn't know that, did you? But you did. You had cancer. The best defense we have against cancer is our own mechanisms for defending against cancer. I'm just remembering they told me I can't go in front of the screen. I forgot. And so that's the third on the list. We'll also talk about organic farming and organic foods. Those are two separate topics, and you cover them with a different attitude in the case of each. So we'll get to that eventually. Genetically engineered food, still very controversial in all of the world. There are some countries that don't allow the growth of plants that are genetically engineered. So we'll talk about that. And then one final thing, but I'm going to jump back to genetically engineered food very quickly. The final thing we'll talk about is stem cells. And why are they so controversial? If you don't, again, stem cells, very simple to understand what a stem cell is. Why they are controversial will be covered as well. In fact, for 8 years, we in our country did not allow the use of federal money for research on stem cells. So quite controversial, and we'll talk about that as well. Those are the things that we'll talk about. Now, during the course of the course, I will be giving you articles to read, short articles for the most part, sometimes a half a page, very short and simple articles that have to do with the topics that we are discussing. The one, though, that we are the chapter. When will we have that available, do you think?
Next week.
Next week, okay. Even though it doesn't come till near the end of the 3 weeks, the chapter is actually on genetically engineered food. And it's the first chapter of a book by Nina Fedorov. She's a brilliant young woman. It's not so young anymore, but anyway, a scientist. And she wrote this book called Mendel in the Kitchen. And that book has a very good first chapter that deals with genetically engineered food. So she will be telling you in that first chapter what the controversy is about genetically engineered food. Now, she has a bias in the matter. There's no doubt about that. And you'll pick that up as you read the chapter. But that's going to be, even though it doesn't come till near the end of our discussions, that will be available to you as soon as we can make it available. That chapter we should be able to. How will you handle that? We'll hand it out as copies of it out. Okay, so the next class is Wednesday, but maybe by Friday. By Friday you'll have that available, and so you'll be able to read that one ahead of time. Other things that I give you will come over the course of the 3 weeks or so, 3.5 weeks that we'll be together. And as I said, they are relatively simple and relatively easy. Now, that list of topics that I gave you is not the total list. I will talk today just a little bit about scientific research and how it's done. It's often also considered to be mystical and mysterious, but it's not. It's simple to understand. And then the final thing we'll talk about is man's place in the universe and where we are in the whole scheme of things. I have often found that it is good to talk a little bit about where we are in the universe. And I'm not talking about religion or anything else. I'm just talking about physically, where we are relative to the Earth and the tree of life on the Earth, and where the Earth is in the universe. That's just to sort of remind us where we are in the whole scheme of things. So let's see. I think that's all I wanted to talk about before we get into some of what we'll be discussing in the rest of the hour. And what we're going to talk about is scientific research and and how it's done and why it's done. And now we'll go to the PowerPoints, I guess. How research is done and how it is checked or reviewed by the scientific community, it hits us regularly. I have in front of me right now this was in a magazine section that's always in the Sunday paper, in almost every Sunday paper in the U.S. It's called Parade, and it's an ad about a medicine that has been available now for some time called Boniva. Have any of you ever heard of that medicine, Boniva? Boniva is one of the best-selling medicines in the U.S. for osteoporosis, especially for women that are over past menopause. So this ad says, I'm going to quote more or less, I'm going to paraphrase. The ad says, it says this, quote, our ads stated that after, quote, after 1 year of Boniva, 9 out of 10 women stopped and reversed their bone loss. In the U.S., and I don't know what's true here in Taiwan, but in the U.S. there's a lot of worry about bone loss in postmenopausal women. So this starts out by saying, as I just said, our ads stated that after 1 year on Boniva, 9 out of 10 women stopped and reversed their bone loss. The ad goes on to say, Boniva, quote, Boniva has not been proven to stop and reverse bone loss in 9 out of 10 women and is not a cure for postmenopausal osteoporosis. If you go back and look at the research that was done on Boniva, it is no surprise that they have found after 5 years or so of the use of the medication that it doesn't work like they were saying that it works, like they were saying that it did work. Just one simple little reason why it is good to understand how research is done and how it can be done in ways that are not really telling us anything new. I'll mention this more than a few times during the course of our 3.5 weeks together. There is a lot of money that goes into the development of these medicines. Lots of money. And by lots, I mean hundreds of millions of dollars just to test a compound. What that means is there's a lot invested. And one has to be very, very careful when there's lots of money invested in anything, because there's this strong, strong push and bias on the part of the people selling whatever it is they spent a lot of money on, so that we will buy it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are being very careful about what they say about these compounds. So that's what happened with Boniva. The research was just not done very well. There are other medications that apparently cause weakness in this bone. What's this bone called again? Femur? Is that right? Femur? All of a sudden, people began to get breaks in their femurs. They just broke, and it was very closely associated again with some of these medications. So it's always necessary for us to be very careful about what we take and what we buy and what is sold to us. So let's talk a little bit about research and scientific research. And there's some research, of course, that's very good, but there are lots of examples of research that's not good. I chose one that goes way back to my childhood. I remember seeing on the TV an ad about gas mileage, gasoline mileage, And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And now I need, yes. That's not clear, I know, way in the back, and it should be much bigger than it is. But you know, you don't really have to see it. Remember, you're going to get the PowerPoint on the website, but I'm going to just tell you what's up on the board here. It's just a scheme for how one goes about doing research. You start by making observations, noticing something, asking questions, forming a hypothesis, make predictions based on your hypothesis, doing experiments, getting the results, and then going back and doing more experiments. That's all that this says, and when you get something where you'll be able to read it, you'll understand. So it's just the sequence of events that one goes through when you're trying to decide what kind of research should I be doing. So it's the way that one designs the research that is necessary. Now, all of you have thought in these terms at one time or another, I'm sure. I've no doubt about it. You've thought about how you can figure out, how you could, if you wanted to, figure out any number of things, like why is your grass not growing? Or why are the fruit trees not growing in an orchard? What's wrong with the fruit trees? And you could, there are different ways that you could go about solving that problem. You could say, well, I will hypothesize, I make the observation that the fruit trees aren't growing well, and I will hypothesize that they've got a problem, that they don't have enough fertilizer, and I will put not natural fertilizer, but rather a chemical fertilizer so that I know exactly what I'm adding. And we'll see what happens with the trees when I add that fertilizer. And maybe your fertilizer had the three major compounds in it that are generally in fertilizers: potassium and phosphorus and nitrogen. And then you would see if the trees grew better. And if they did, you could say, okay, it was a fertilizer problem. But you don't know which of the three elements in the fertilizer, and so then you would say, okay, I know it's one of those three, or maybe it's all of those three, but what do I do to figure out? And so on and so forth. You get the idea. So all of you run into that circumstance. I am sure of it, and you have figured out what you could do to figure out what the answer is. So you form the hypothesis, and then you do an experiment. A very interesting set of experiments was done not very long ago, maybe 10 years ago, and this had to do with I'm looking for this compound right there, olestra. Olestra was very interesting to lots of people because olestra was much like a fat, except it wasn't digested. So it worked like a fat in cooking and so on. But some people felt that olestra was causing it's going to take me a while to get the hang of this, was causing abdominal cramping. And so some food products even put this warning on the packages, and because they had heard that might be a problem. The good thing about the food cooked with olestra was that it was not fattening at all. It was not fattening because it didn't have any fat in it. And so lots of things have been and are still made with olestra. Olestra is like a fat, but it's not digestible. So an experiment was done, and the experiment was one that asked the question, is olestra causing cramping? And the experiment was a rather simple one. It was one where they had hundreds of people, 500 people, and they fed some potato chips that had a Lester in it, some potato chips that didn't have a Lester in it, and they then checked just to see what the effect was. And what they determined was that they both got cramps, but they got them in about the same amount. So that was just a very simple experiment that showed that Olestra was not problematic. Now that was a, if you looked into the background of that research on Olestra, it was very good research. This goes back a long ways, and like I say, it happens to be the first one that I remember where the research wasn't very good at all. And it was where cars were taken, and what was checked was gasoline. And the gasoline was Shell, and so they took two identical cars to the salt flats of Utah. This is just a great, huge, flat area. And they put these two cars side by side and gave them the same amount of gas, and off they went. And then there came a time eventually where they ran out of gas. They had, I think, 2.5 gallons, and so they ran out of gas. And when they ran out, and the car that had the Shell gasoline went a lot further, and than the car that didn't have Shell gasoline. And so the conclusion of the ad was Shell gasoline gives you better mileage. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that research and that experiment? What do you think's wrong with it? Huh? What's wrong with that research? Why couldn't they really conclude that Shell gasoline was better? The vehicles using the gasoline was different? Now, they were supposed to be identical cars, but that's a very good answer. What she said was the cars might have been different. And you just don't know. So how could you tell if that was a problem? What would you do? What was the experiment you would do?
They should put it into two same environments to do the test. They cannot put it into different environments.
Okay, that should be same environment in both cases. And one could go on. There are just lots of different ways in which the experiment could be proven. For example, what about, were they really traveling on exactly the same ground as they went from one place to another? You know, maybe it looked the same, but they didn't know that for sure. So even in my 10-year-old mind, I was thinking at the time, this is not a good way to determine whether that gasoline is better. This is a scientist that is working today. His name is Tyrone Hayes. He works at UC Berkeley, and he has some, still today, has some real concerns about a particular compound that is present in our environment. And the compound is called atrazine. Atrazine is an herbicide. It is the most widely used herbicide on the face of the earth. It's used worldwide, all over. People use atrazine. And Tyrone Hayes said, I think that atrazine is problematic. We should not be using atrazine, he said, because I think that atrazine is causing the death of amphibians. Have you heard about the problem with amphibians, you know, frogs and toads and such? And they are dying in large numbers, and some species have actually disappeared from the face of the earth. They've just gone away. Tyrone Hayes thinks that they have gone away because of atrazine. He believes that atrazine is killing these amphibians, and that it's the reason for the big crisis that we have in the amphibians populations in the world. So he does different kinds of experiments, and this down on the bottom just shows that in the U.S. this is this is the distribution of atrazine. These are unusual high concentrations in this part of the U.S. because that happens to be where corn and soybeans are grown, and atrazine is a very good weed killer for corn and soybeans. But all of these are high concentrations. These are just unusually high concentrations. Some countries don't allow more than 5 parts per billion in any of their media, in their water or their soil. In this part of the U.S., the concentration of atrazine sometimes gets as high as 80, not 3, but 80 parts per billion. And it could be causing the kinds of damage, says Tyrone Hayes, that we are worried about. It could be killing the amphibians, and if it's doing that to the amphibians, what else could be going on? Now, a long time ago, he probably got this idea and this way of thinking from the use of DDT. DDT is a compound that is used for malaria primarily, and it turns out that DDT was causing the thinning of eggshells, and so birds, especially birds of prey, riparian birds, hawks and falcons and so on, their numbers began to decline. And the reason that their numbers declined was because the eggshells were thinning, and they were, and so the eggs would break in the nest, and the populations just slowly dropped over the years. And eventually they realized that DDT was causing that thinning of the eggshells, and so they stopped using DDT, at least in our country. But they've stopped using it in lots of countries, not in all countries, but in lots of countries. So Tyrone Hayes says that same kind of thing is what's happening with atrazine, and we should be worried about that. He is still doing his research, and there are people in the U.S. and other countries that don't believe that atrazine is really responsible. And of course, the company that makes atrazine, they're going crazy about his work. They just feel that it's absolutely nonsense, and that he is hurting their sales, and so on and so forth. So there are some very interesting back and forth between Tyrone Hayes and the company that makes atrazine. An interesting thought occurs to one when you start looking at those kinds of controversies. There are two kinds of new things on the face of the earth over the last 30 years or so. One of them is compounds, chemical compounds that we did not evolve with at all. We didn't evolve with all of these pesticides. They weren't on the earth as the human species has been evolving over time. Does anybody know when the humans appeared on the face of the earth, about how long ago that was? This is our genus, Homo sapiens. It's not that long. It's just about 150,000 years. And of course, it's not that long, relatively speaking, but it's a long time. It's a heck of a long time when you think about what part of that total time period these compounds were on the face of the earth. They've only been with us for 20, 30, 40 years. And this just starts to name the company. Pharmaceutical compounds, food additives, stuff coming out of smokestacks, stuff coming out of automobile exhaust pipes, the tires going down the road and wearing off and throwing things into the air, especially compounds high in cadmium. So lots of new things in our environment. It's amazing that we survive at all when you think about it, right? Here we are, and yet we've got all of this in our environment. The main reason, and again we're going to come back to it when we get into some of the other topics that I was talking about, has to do with our immune system. Our immune system is miraculous. The things that it can do to save us. But in any event, we've got all of these things that are in the air that have and around us and about us that we've never. Half of us in this room have on clothes that have in it materials that are not natural, and so all of those kinds of things. At the same time, there are lots of new diseases that have shown up within just the same period of time, 30 or 40 years. Now, some of these are not in that category, but these are ones that your parents probably did not know about. They did not know about Alzheimer's disease. They did not know about autism. They did not know about fibromyalgia. They did not know about osteoporosis, which we were just talking about a moment ago, or lupus, or any number of new things. Now, many of these could have existed, but we just didn't recognize them or we maybe called them by a different name. Some people say, for example, that Alzheimer's it was just so uncommon that we just did not notice it before because people died at a younger age. But now people are living longer, and so we are seeing Alzheimer's. But that can't be true for autism. Autism is actually a disease of the young, primarily, and not the super young, because when children are 1 or 2 or 3 years old, they don't show the signs of autism. It's when they get to be 4 or 5 that they start showing the signs of autism. So a vocabulary, for example, of a 2-year-old might be greater than its vocabulary when it gets to be 4 years old. But that too, if you ask your parents if they remember talking about autism when they were your age or when they were younger, they will very likely say no, because these are new diseases. And the question is, do they relate to all of these new compounds that are on the face of the earth? Now, there's one important thing to remember about research on all of these compounds and on all of these activities, and that is that oftentimes research is done that shows a correlation, and you understand that, I'm sure. Correlation means that a particular, there are 2 things that happen at the same time, but you can't really prove that one causes the other. But some people jump to the conclusion that one causes the other just because they're both happening at the same time. So it's a case where correlation occurs, but it doesn't prove effect or cause effect. And that is probably the single most common mistake that's made in research. And oftentimes we will read about correlation in the newspaper or in magazines, and it's not really, it doesn't have anything to do with cause effect. It's just correlation. What we're going to talk about when we come back after the break are 2 unusual kinds of research. One of them is research, and these are experiments that have done very well with, again, hundreds and hundreds of people. One of them is research that more or less proves that it is better if we drink a little bit of alcohol than if we drink none at all. College students usually love that research, and it is really, and it's absolutely a fact. And you may have heard it before, that if you are of age, that drinking 1 or 2 glasses of wine, for example, a day is good for you. And this is shown in this research because teetotalers, that's a funny word, but it means people that don't drink at all. Teetotalers are not, in this experiment, they don't live as long as people who drink just a little. In fact, they don't live as long as people who drink a lot. We'll talk about that when we come back. And then there's another kind of research as well that we will discuss, and it has to do with obesity and the fact that if one looks in the entire country, in the entire U.S., you find, pardon me for using the U.S. for all of these examples, it happens to be the country that I know well. If you look in all of the U.S., there are some places where the obesity problem, a problem you are fortunate not to have in this country, but we have it big time in the U.S., there are some states where the obesity problem is not nearly as bad as it is in other states. And we'll talk about that as well. Oregon happens to be the state where they don't have nearly the obesity problem that we have in Mississippi, for example. So we'll talk about those two kinds of experiments when you come back. So I'll see you in about 15 or 20 minutes. Talking about the obesity experiments and what was found in different parts of the country that I live in, the United States. Before we talk some more about that, though, I'd like to talk about the quiz, because we will have a quiz next period, and again, it will happen during the second half of the class after the break, and the quiz will be very simple. It's not intended to be tricky. It's just a matter of whether or not you understood what was presented, not any more than that. So there will be 4 questions, I believe, and it's a multiple choice exam. So I don't know exactly how we'll do this, but we could do it as simply as this. We could put it up on the screen, and you could simply write the answers on a 3x5 card or paper that we will hand out, and it'll come in. I don't know how I will deal with this, but it will be generally graded on a curve. So I'll tell you more about that next time. But the quiz will occur during the second half of the class. Let's talk a little bit about. Do we have obesity? Do we have obesity next, or should we? Okay. This is the obesity test that was done. This is a report in a newspaper. It's the Sacramento Bee, and it's how most people get their news about these kinds of things. This was in the Sacramento Bee. And this actually, that photograph has nothing to do with this study. It just happens to be a photograph that the Bee had of a weight loss program that was handled out in Pocono, I think it was anyway. But anyway, the interesting thing that was found in this study was that in the state of Oregon, 9% of the children were obese, and this is by very strict standards having to do with the body mass index, and so 9% were obese. But in the state of Mississippi, 22% were obese. And the question is, because it raised a lot of questions immediately, the question is, what could be the possible reason for those differences? What do you think? Why would people? Oregon is in the northwestern part of the country. Mississippi's in the southeastern part of the country. There are other kinds of differences as well, but why would there be differences?
I overheard people saying that he wants
Southern America eat more fried food?
More dry food or
Fried, like fried food.
fried food, which probably is true of fast food, right? It's more like from McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken. What do you call Kendoji? Anyway, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sorry, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I guess it's fast food.
You get fast food?
I guess it's fast food.
You guess it's fast food. Is that the only thing? Can anybody think of any other reason why there would be differences?
Children there do not like
Sports?
do not like to exercise.
Okay, do not like to exercise, so it may be that in Mississippi, the children are much less likely to be involved in exercise or sports. If you knew the geography of the U.S., Oregon is in a very, it's in an environment where people are more likely to want to get outside and do things outside. So that's another possibility. Anything else occur to people? Why it could be different? Yeah.
I don't know, economy, like in the South, they don't have as much money as they do in Oregon, and fast food is much cheaper.
That's another
And
possibility.
food is more expensive in Oregon than in Mississippi than it is in Oregon.
That's another possibility. So it's has to do with what's available to the people and what they can get and what they can eat and what they maybe the education level is another possibility. But how about some other some other things? Are there other reasons why people would be more obese? Is that true in China, by the way, in mainland China? I know it's not true in the indigenous people in Taiwan are not different in that way, right? They aren't more obese. How about in China, mainland China? No? So what other reasons? Remember, we have a very, in the U.S., we have a very diverse population. We have people of all different Hispanic and African American. So I guess one might look into what was different there. What we're doing is actually finding those things that they are correlations. So that's how we start. What are the correlations? We've got people that are more obese in Mississippi than in Oregon. Well, what are the correlations? And one of them, as was mentioned, is turns out that there are more fried foods are more popular, and the diets are fatty in the southeastern U.S. than they are in the Northwest. So that's one possibility. And it also turns out that they are more active, physically active. So that's another possibility. But till now, nobody has been able to prove one way or the other. What kind of experiment would you do to try and figure this out? Let's say that you would start with a hypothesis, right? And what would your hypothesis be? Yeah?
Maybe like there's different people into like in Oregon and then move to Mississippi to see if they get better. Or like when people who originally live in Mississippi and then move to Oregon, Mississippi, they get better.
That's a good experiment. Yeah. You'd put an ad in the paper and you'd say, everybody that used to live in Mississippi and now lives in Oregon, show up and we'll give you $10 and get the information from you. So that would be a good way to get a start on what was the reason for this. That's what people are looking into right now. The data, though, are very good. There's no doubt about the fact that children at a particular age are more obese in Mississippi. So the data are good in that regard. What people now are interested in is why that's the case. Because again, while you don't see the problem here in Taiwan, in the world generally, in the Western world especially, obesity has gotten to be a bigger and bigger problem. And it's not necessarily because people have more money to get lots and lots of food. It's not that at all. It has to do with something else, something different than that. So that's one kind of research that's going on, and very important to remember this when you're thinking, when you read articles like this. In the article someplace, you should find a place where this is the popular article, but they will refer to the scientific article. There should always be a reference that says, it was recently reported in the Journal of Nutrition that thus and such happened. It was determined that obesity was a bigger problem in some places than in others. The reason that's important, and we'll see it again in the next thing that we talk about, the reason that's important is that research, if it is good research, it has been reviewed very rigorously by people in the field, by people who know about obesity. And they read these articles very carefully. It is sent by the authors to a particular journal, and that journal has a panel of reviewers, chosen by one means or another, a panel of reviewers, that they send the paper to. Maybe they send it out to 5 different reviewers. And those reviewers read the paper very carefully, and they say either they did a very good job, they did the research well, or they didn't. And if they say they didn't do the research well, it never gets published. And if it never gets published in a bona fide research journal, it will never show up in the newspaper, or as we'll see in the next one, Time magazine. It will just never show up because it never gets into the reviewed journals to begin with. That's always good to remember. If you're reading something about that definitely had to have research, look for the reference to the original article. Okay, now we want to go to the drinking article. This made quite a big stir because people just could not quite believe the results, and so it was done over and over in many different ways in many different parts of the country, and it was shown that in fact it is true. Nope, that's the last slide, and what we need is this is life expectancy of teetotalers versus heavy drinkers. Try that one. Yeah, that's it. Now here again, you can't read this, but I'll tell. This is what appeared in Time magazine, and I'll tell you what it says. But the important thing about this is that once more, if you look carefully in this article, and again, you can't see it. You might be able to see it when you take a look at the PowerPoint. But it says right about here, which you can't see. But what it says, I'll read what it says. It says, I'll read the end of the first paragraph and the beginning of the next paragraph. Show up as teetotalers in such research are actually former hardcore drunks. This is what some people thought the answer was. But a new paper in the journal Alcoholism, Clinical and Experimental Research. That is a very rigorous research journal that has these reviewers that very carefully went over the research to determine whether or not it was going to be published in that particular journal. So this is just Time magazine, but they're drawing the information from a journal that it is reviewed and it's can be trusted. Now again, as I mentioned just a moment ago, the interesting thing about this research is that the comparison was made to people who drank moderately, and moderate was considered 1 to 3 drinks a day, and heavy drinking, I presume that's more than 1 to 3 drinks a day. And then no drinking, and there are lots of people that don't drink at all for one reason or another. I happen to know a woman, has nothing to do with religion or her morals or anything. She just gets terrible headaches when she drinks alcohol. So she's an example of somebody who just doesn't consume alcohol anymore. But there are people like the Mormon religion and so on where they just do not drink. So this study showed it was done by 6 members, the researchers, and the length of the experiment was 20 years. So it was done over a 20-year period, and they would choose people between the age of 55 and 65, find out how much they drank on average, and in this experiment there were 1,824 participants, and then they looked, as time passed, they looked at, after 20 years, they looked at how many people died during the course of the experiment, and they had all the proper controls in there. And they found that people that drank moderately lived the longest. Only 41% of those people died during the 20-year period. Next were the heavy drinkers, and they lived the second longest. 60% of them died. So there's a big difference between the heavy drinkers and the moderate drinkers. But an even bigger difference if you didn't drink at all. So the no drinking, 69% of them died. So when you get the PowerPoint, you'll be able to read this more carefully. But the bottom line is that there are significant differences between the people that drank not at all and the people that were heavy drinkers and the moderate drinkers. Now, there were all kinds of reasons that were put forward as possibilities, but here again, people don't know for sure why that is. What do you think the reason? How could it possibly be that people that drink a little bit live longer than people that don't drink at all? Alcohol might be doing something in the body that's good for it. Must be something like that is going on. How about you? You have an idea?
I think did this research they control for the income?
Oh, for income?
Yeah, income. Yeah. Because like, if you have more income, then you can get more good health service, and maybe that's good benefit for your health.
That's a
so you can live longer.
Yeah, that's a possibility. That it may be that the poorest of the poor, if they're responsible, they can't afford to drink, and so they're really dying because they're the poorest of the poor, not necessarily because they're not drinking. So that's another possibility. What do you think?
Maybe the reason why they don't drink is because they have no health problem. They get headache or something.
Not a bad idea. So they have other kinds of health problems that might cause them not to live as long. But it also happens to be causing them not to drink very much because it just complicates their life. They're already sick. Well, that's a possibility. have you ever heard of drinking making you more relaxed? How about that as a possibility? What do you think?
Yes, I think it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Because drinking, moderate drinkers, live a life more relaxing. But for those who don't drink anyone's, maybe they have no way to relax their stress or pressure.
And maybe that causes other problems. The fact that they're more uptight all the time, even in these tense social situations, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. That actually is the favorite hypothesis right now. That really what's happening is that people that drink a little are able to relax in circumstances that would otherwise be tense for them. And that's what's going on. But that, again, that's not proof. The numbers, boy, that slide is not a very good slide, is it? But hopefully it'll be better when you're looking at the PowerPoint. There are some other things going on, though. It turns out that moderate drinking does improve your health in particular ways. It improves heart health. It improves circulation in the body. But the big difference is it improves sociability. You are more social. You're more relaxed in circumstances like that, and so in the right situations, it makes you a more relaxed person. So moderate drinking is a good thing. Abstention, not drinking at all, is not a good thing because you're the worst of the three groups if you are abstaining. Not good to not drink. In that particular case, people who drink not at all, it was thought that their problem was that they might have been people that in the past drank a lot. And so they were now in, you know the term 12-step program? Maybe not, but 12-step program it's a program that helps people that were alcoholics before. And it helps them deal with that alcoholism. And it may be that they just are better. They had a big problem before, and it's really the illness that stems from the drinking in the past that causes their trouble. They are teetotalers because they were in the past were strong drinkers. Well, that was the hypothesis. They checked that. They asked all of the people for their history. That turned out not to be the case as well. You know, the people that really argued for that were the people that run these programs to cure alcoholics. They did not want, because they preach no drinking at all, that the only way you're going to cure yourself if you're an alcoholic is to not drink at all. That's their notion. So they were very much against the idea, or very, very much for the idea that it might be that people were that were non-drinkers were only non-drinkers because at one time they had a big alcohol problem. For all of that news about drinking, there is one thing to remember, and that is that even though people who drink a lot live longer than people that drink not at all, they have other problems, big ones, especially with their liver, for example. They are more likely to get in accidents, fatal accidents. All of that, though, still gives them, the data are such that they live longer. Even though they are subject to car accidents, they're subject to cirrhosis of the liver and all of that. So it's yet another kind of research that is very interesting, but if you are going to believe any of it, you've got to go to the original work that was done to answer the question, is this really worth my consideration? Well, this is all kind of interesting stuff, but it's just an introduction to the work that we're going to be studying as the 3.5 weeks passes. It's something. It's just a good thing to keep in one's mind that as we talk about the research that we're going to be talking about, having to do with evolution and stem cells and genetic engineering, you always have to ask yourself the question: what was the nature of this research? How was it done? Who checked it? What kinds of journals was it published in? And the reason that I'm getting that chapter 1 of Mendel in the Kitchen out to you early is that that's one thing that Nina Fedorov does. She's very careful about the research, the nature of the research, and how well it was reviewed. So you're going to get that a little bit ahead of time, and you'll be able to read it and perhaps have read it by the time we get to genetic engineering. So that's all we'll do today, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday evening. Thank you.